Okay, today we're going to cover section 4.2 and 4.3. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're not doing any proofs today. So we're doing all of the non-proof information from section 4.2 and 4.3, and then tomorrow we'll go over the proofs from section 4.2 and 4.3. So we're just kind of splitting it up differently this time. So section 4.2 and 4.3 are shortcuts for proving triangles congruent. I know everyone usually likes shortcuts, so that's a good thing. What we talked about in section 4.1 and how it relates to this is in section 4.1 we talked about triangle congruence and how we needed to know 6 pieces of the triangle. 3 sets of sides, 3 sets of angles are congruent for one triangle to another triangle to prove the triangles are congruent. So that's the longer version. For section 4.2 and 4.3, our shortcuts, there's going to be just 3 pieces of information that you need to know for each triangle. 3 sets of either sides or angles that are congruent to say the 2 triangles are congruent by. The first 2 we're going to talk about are side, 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 and side, angle, side. Okay, so side, 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 or we abbreviate it with SSS, says that if all 3 sides of a triangle are congruent to all 3 sides of another triangle, then those 2 triangles are congruent to each other. So what is showing here, and there's information marked on the picture, if JK is congruent to XY, you can see those are marked congruent with 1 mark. KL is congruent to YZ, and that is marked with 2 marks and 2 marks. And JL is congruent to XZ, 3 marks and 3 marks. Then the 2 triangles must be congruent. If we're going to say 2 triangles are congruent, we're going to use one of those congruent statements like we talked about in section 4.1. So when we write a congruent statement, remember we said there's different correct ways to write a congruent statement. It does not matter how you name the first triangle, but then it does matter how you name the second triangle. However you do the first triangle, you need to follow that pattern or follow that lead to do the second triangle. So I chose to say triangle JKL. Now I need to be careful when I pick one. You know, if I say JKL, I went across the 1 mark and then across the 2 mark. Some people like to actually kind of show on their paper which direction they chose to go. So across the 1 mark, across the 2 mark, and now when I go to say the other triangle, I need to follow that same pattern. The figures might be flipped or turned, so I got to be careful. I'm going to go across the 1 mark and then across the 2 mark. So I need to say X, Y, Z. So just slow down and be careful when you're doing that. And again, if it helps you to go, okay, across the 1 mark, across the 2 mark, if it helps you to show on the paper what direction you're going, then that is helpful for some people. All right, the included angle is something we need to be familiar with. An included angle, if you think of included, it's inclusion, kind of you're on the inside, you're not an outsider. So included angle in a triangle, the angle formed by any 2 sides. Okay, so you know, if here's 2 sides, the included angle is right in the middle of those 2 sides. If we're talking about these 2 sides, angle X would be the included angle because it's right in between. So side angle side postulate, or we abbreviate it with SAS, says if 2 sides and the included angle of a triangle are congruent to 2 sides and the included angle of another triangle, then those triangles are congruent. And we can see that in the picture right here. We can see it says that PQ is congruent to DE, so PQ is congruent to DE, and if PR is congruent to DF, so PR and DF both get 2 marks, 2 marks, and angle P is congruent to angle D, then we're saying these 2 triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. Okay, I can see that there's a clump of 3 markings, and if I pick from one side or the other to go from, I've got side, angle, side. Again, the included angle, meaning the angle right in between the 2 sides. If I see that this says side, angle, side, it's showing me the angle marked has to be right in between the 2 congruent sides. That's how it should look in your picture. The angle marked congruent should be right in between the 2 congruent sides. Angle marked congruent, right in between the 2 congruent side markings. Okay? Then I can say the 2 triangles are congruent, and again, when I say the triangles are congruent, I need to write that congruent statement, and I do have to be careful what order I'm putting those letters in. So it doesn't matter how I name the first one. If I just choose to go PQR, okay, so I chose to go P to Q to R. I went across the 1 mark side, and then across the no mark side. I started at the 1 mark angle. So down here, I'm going to start at the 1 mark angle, I'm going to go across the 1 mark side and then across the no mark side. So again, I got to slow down and follow that same pattern, and so that ends up being DEF. So just take your time to make sure you get that written correctly. It says angle P is included by QP and PR, meaning, you know, angle P is right in the middle of QP and PR. And it says angle D is included by ED and DF. Okay, angle D is the angle right in between those two congruent sides. Okay, let's go ahead and get that moved up and check out example 1. So on example 1, okay, on example 1, it says what other information is needed to prove the 2 triangles congruent by side angle side. So I can see 2 sets of sides are congruent for each triangle, but I need to know 3 pieces of information. So they're asking, what is that 3rd piece of information that you need to know for each triangle to say the 2 triangles are congruent by side angle side? And so I'm going to go and mark on my picture what it should be. It should be these included angles would need to be congruent to say the 2 triangles are congruent by side angle side. So angle B is congruent to angle G is that extra piece of information that I would need. Okay. On B, it says what other information to prove these 2 triangles congruent by side angle side. Now on this one, there's 2 pieces of information that would work. Okay. One person might look at it and say, okay, if I knew that this angle was congruent to this angle, I could say they were congruent by side angle side, so that would be fine. Angle Z is congruent to angle T. Okay, but there's another correct answer here. I see here a side and an angle, and I see a side and an angle. So if I knew that these 2 sides were congruent, that would be a way to prove them congruent by side angle side, side angle side. So I could also say XY is congruent to RS. So either of those things, if I knew them, would allow me to say the 2 triangles are congruent by side angle side. Okay, down here on example 2, it's saying, would you use side, 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 side angle side, or there is an option of not enough information to prove these 2 triangles are congruent to each other. Okay, so I can see that these two sides are congruent, these 2 sides are congruent, but that's only 2 pieces of information for each. What you need to get in the habit of doing is looking at your picture to say, is there anything else that I know is congruent besides what is marked on the picture? That I know for sure is congruent. I can't just guess, but do I know that it's for sure congruent? I can see if these 2 triangles share this side, then I know that these 2 triangles, that this side of this triangle is congruent to this side of this triangle by their reflexive property. So I can go ahead and mark it congruent for each triangle. And then now I can say these 2 triangles are congruent by side, 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 side. So I'm going to put SSS underneath. Okay. Sometimes they're going to ask you to write a congruent statement, but this one didn't give us letters on there, so we don't have to do the congruent statement at this point. If they did ask me to write the congruent statement, I would make sure to be careful to put the letters in the right corresponding order. On this one, I can see this angle and this angle are congruent, this angle, not angle, side. These 2 sides are congruent, these 2 sides are congruent, but I have to think, is there anything else that I know for sure is congruent besides what is marked? Okay? And hopefully you're seeing these vertical angles that we learned about in chapter 1 formed by the X. That shows up a lot. Sharing a side shows up a lot in this chapter. Vertical angles shows up a lot in this chapter. So I can see these 2 vertical angles must be congruent. Yes, maybe these lines look congruent or parallel. Maybe these angles look congruent. But I do not know that for sure, so I cannot just start marking a bunch of things on the pictures. I have to go with something that I know for sure. Okay, so this is all I know. So sometimes it helps people to cover up one of the pictures so they don't get confused. So if I want to name those markings, okay, I can see there's 2 sides marked and 1 angle, and the angle is right in between the 2 sides. So I would call this side angle side or side angle side. Okay, So again, for some people, it just helps them not to be looking at all the markings at one time and just to be looking at one triangle at a time. So that one's side angle side. Okay, let's go ahead and get that moved up. Okay, same directions as what we were just doing. So the direction said side, 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 side angle side, or not enough information. So if we look at C, I can see that there's nothing else I know for sure is congruent besides what is marked. But I already have 3 things marked for each triangle. So let's take a look at that. I see these 2 sides are congruent to these 2 sides. I can see the included angle is congruent for both. So I know for sure that these 2 triangles are congruent by side angle side. Okay, again, there's 2 sides and an included angle. Angle's right in the middle of the 2 sides. 2 sides and the included angle. Angle's right between the 2 sides. Side angle side, side angle side. Okay, and then here, if I look at these 2 triangles, I can see that there's nothing else that I know is congruent besides what is marked. Okay, no other angles. I don't know for sure that those sides are congruent. So if I only know 2 pieces of each triangle are congruent, and I don't know anything else is congruent, then I'm going to say not enough info on this one. Okay? All right, so the other 3 examples, oh, actually one more example that's not approved. Let's go and do that. We look at example 3. That is one that is not approved, so we'll go ahead and take care of that. So example 3 says, what other information do you need to prove triangle GHK is congruent to triangle KLG by side angle side, and explain? All right, so if we look at what we know here, we can already see that this piece is congruent to this piece. And it's asking what other information do we need to know. Okay, so we already know that it's congruent to that. Okay, we can already see that GK is congruent to GK because they share that side. And so they're asking what other information do we need to prove congruent by side angle side. Well, if I have 2 sides marked congruent to these 2 sides, it needs to be the included angle. So it has to be this angle and this angle marked congruent. That's what I would have to know to prove these 2 triangles congruent by side angle side. So now I can name those 2 angles. Angle LGK is congruent to HKG. Okay, and again, those are the included angles. And I would have to know those included angles are congruent to end up saying the 2 triangles are congruent by side angle side. Okay? All right, so now the next 2, example 4 and example 5, are proofs, so we'll go over those tomorrow. But now we need to do a little bit with section 4.3, but it'll go a little faster because you're already familiar with the 4.2. So, we'll go ahead and get that moved up. So think for a minute, what are the 2 ways we were proving triangles congruent in the last section? And if you think about that, we were just using side, 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 and side, angle, side. Okay, now there's 2 more. We've got angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. These are our last 2 right here. Okay, now if you notice there's lots of A's and lots of S's, keep in mind these are our only 4 options. Side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. Okay, so you just want to make sure you don't get any other combination of S's and A's. Okay, keep in mind if you start to write on your paper and you're cussing me out with some A's and some S's, then you'll know that something's wrong, and that is not a way to prove triangles congruent. These are our only 4 options. All right, so angle, side, angle is the next one, and angle, side, angle says if 2 angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles and the included side of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent to each other. So similar to what we did last time, if angle A is congruent to angle D, I can see that's marked for each. I can see AC is congruent to DF, and that's marked congruent for each. And angle C is congruent to F. If that's congruent for each, I can see these two triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle. Angle, side, angle. It's two angles, one side, and again, the side is included or right in between the two angles. Again, I can say these two triangles are congruent. And again, the order of my letters matters when I do a congruent statement. If I choose to go A, B, C, then if I went one mark, no mark, two mark for the angles, follow the same pattern over here. One mark, no mark, two mark, so D, E, F. Okay? For angle, angle, side, if two angles and a non-included side of one triangle are congruent to two angles and the corresponding non-included side of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. So over here, we have angle A is congruent to angle D, and we have angle B is congruent to E, and we have AC is congruent to DF. Then we can say these two triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side. We can see there's two A's and there's one S, but the S is not right in between the two A's. It's not included, not right in between the two A's, and that's how it should look in my picture. This side marked congruent is not right in between the two A's. If it was, it would be angle, side, angle. But it's not, so it's angle, angle, side. So there is a difference between those, so be careful. Sometimes people get those mixed up, and you just want to be careful, okay? Now all the other ones, it doesn't matter like which direction you go, they're the same. This one is the only one that if you didn't say angle, angle, side, you would say side, angle, angle. I don't really mark it wrong if people put that, but you just want to kind of get in the habit of this is the way it's usually written, as angle, angle, side. Okay, so I can say these two triangles are congruent, again with my congruent statement. Again, it doesn't matter how I name the first one. If I just go ABC, then I need to follow that lead on the next one. One mark, two mark, no mark. One mark, two mark, no mark. D, E, F. Keep in mind, sometimes the figures are flipped or turned, so that's why you just need to slow down and be careful when you're naming those. All right, let's go ahead and get this moved up. So we can try example 1. Okay, so on example 1, what they're asking us to do here, it says name the two triangles that are congruent by angle, side, angle. So in this case, I'm just picking which two represent angle, side, angle. Again, there's two angles marked congruent, and there's one side, and the side is right in between the two angles. It's the included side. So, you know, here I see two angles and a side, and the side is right in between the two angles. Here I see two angles marked and a side, and the side's right between the two angles. Here I see two sides, two angles marked congruent and a side, but the side is not right in between the two angles. So it needs to be this one and this one that are the congruent ones. And when they say to name it, I can name it with a congruent statement. So again, it doesn't matter how I name the first one. If I just go RQS, so RQS, one mark, two mark, no mark, I can follow the same pattern over here. One mark, two mark, no mark. So triangle TUB. Okay. Over here on B, it is wanting us to, again, look for angle, side, angle. So I have two angles and a side. Side's right in between the two angles. Two angles and a side. Side is right in between the two angles. Two angles and a side. The side is not right in between the two angles. So the two that are representing angle, side, angle are this one and this one. Again, I can do my congruent statement. It doesn't matter how I name the first one. I'll just say angle, triangle ABC. But it does matter how I name the second one. So if I go ABC, one mark, no mark, two mark, follow the same pattern over here. One mark, no mark, two mark, so JKL. Okay. So on example 2, it says, are the following triangles congruent, and if so, how? So if we slow down and look at this, I always want to look at a picture to think, is there anything else I know for sure is congruent besides what is marked? And again, they're sharing a side, so I know that side is congruent for both. Okay, so now if I look at each triangle separately, I can see there's two sides and an angle, but the angle is not right between the two sides. And I can see over here there's two sides and an angle, but the angle is not right between the two sides. Okay, and so what this picture is showing is, you could either think of it as side, side, angle, okay, or you can think of it as angle, side, side. And again, we said you can't cuss me out and you can't cuss me out backwards. Those are not ways to prove triangles congruent. Okay, our only ways to prove triangles are congruent are side, 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 angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. Those are our only four options. That picture is not showing one of those four options. So are the triangles congruent? We have to say no. Okay, and it says if so, how are the following triangles congruent? If so, how? You know, if I want to explain why they're not congruent, I can say no, that, you know, side, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. Oops, I didn't even write it right. Side, side, angle, and angle, side, side are not ways to prove triangles. Let's draw a triangle congruent. Okay, so that is not a way to prove triangles congruent. All right, so then let's get that moved out. We are almost done for today. Almost done. Hang in there. So you go up to example 3. This is similar to what we did on yesterday's notes, where it was asking us what additional information would you need to prove each pair of triangles congruent by the stated postulant or theorem. So again, if you want to try these on your own and pause the video for a minute and then show it again and check to see if you're right, that would just be good practice for the quiz review and the quiz and the assignments that are kind of coming up on this stuff. So angle, side, angle, if you just want to do it with me because you need a little more practice for right now, that's fine as well. So angle, side, angle. First I want to look to see, is there anything else I know is congruent besides what is marked? And I do know they share this side, so I'm going to mark them congruent. And if I want to know what else I need to know that of them congruent, it would have to be, if this is an angle and that's a side, I'd have to know these two angles are congruent. So I'll say angle, I would need to know angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD. Okay, and if I knew that, then I could say the two triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle. All right, on number 2, it's saying angle, angle, side. First, I want to see, is there anything else I know for sure is congruent besides what is marked? Yep, that side that they share. And if it says angle, angle, side, I've got an angle, I've got a side, I need another angle. So if I knew that this angle, say, was congruent to this angle, then I could say angle, angle, side, angle, angle, side. So I can say angle JMK is congruent to angle LKM. If I know knew those two are congruent, I could say they were congruent by angle, angle, side. For number 3, I have to look at the picture again. What else do I know is congruent besides what is marked? I know these two vertical angles are definitely congruent to each other. Okay, now if I think about what additional information I would need for angle, side, angle, I've got an angle, I've got a side, I would need another angle over here. Okay, I've got an angle, I've got a side, I would need another angle over here. So if I knew that angle X was congruent to angle V, then I could say the two triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle. Okay, on number 4, to think, what else do I know is congruent besides what is marked? Oh yeah, they share this side. So I can say that these two triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side, as long as I know one more set of angles is congruent. Okay, so if I knew that this angle was congruent to this angle, then I could say angle, angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side. So I would need to know that angle Y, is congruent to angle O. All right. Then, again, I want to look on number 5. What else do I know is congruent besides what is marked? Oh yeah, they share a side. And then I want to think, what additional information would I need to prove these two triangles congruent by angle, angle, side? Again, I see a side, I see an angle. I know right angles are always congruent to each other. And so I would need another angle, a set of angles, and it would be these two. If I knew that angle P was congruent to angle A, then I could say angle, angle, side, angle, angle, side. All right, then on number 6 is angle, side, angle. Again, first I'm going to look to see what else do I know is congruent besides what is marked. I can see they share a side. And then again, if I want to do angle, side, angle, I've got an angle, I've got a side, I need another angle over here. I've got an angle, I've got a side, I need another angle over here, so that side is the included side, the one right in the middle. And so those blue markings, I need to name 3 letters. Angle CYL would be congruent to ALY. And if I knew those two are congruent, then I'd be good to go there. Okay, any questions there? So feel free to text me or message me on Canvas if you do have any questions. The other 3 examples for this section are proofs, so we will go over those tomorrow.